not a writer.
Okay.
Yeah, but on my way home, yeah. Wouldn't it be crazy? But you still amaze me. Wouldn't it be crazy? But you still amaze me. Wouldn't it be crazy? But you still amaze me. Wouldn't it be crazy? But you still amaze me. Yeah, but on my way home, yeah.
Welcome to episode 9 of My Views Extended. I'm your host, Nadia. I just wanted to start off with a few updates this week. A couple disclaimers when it comes to the music that you hear for my intro and for my outro. If you hear it and it has a mute or a bleep or something, whatever edit I used, it's because I'm choosing to edit it, because in my podcast I'm going to do my best. I'm not going to be perfect, but I'm going to do my best not to curse or use profanity. So yeah, that's just part of how I am. Unless of course I've smashed my toe into the wall for the third time that day. In regard to music, if it's like the N-word, and yes, I said the N-word, and I know that bothers some Black people, but we're all different. I don't use the ER or the at the ending of the N-word. So if you listen to the music, not every week is it going to be the same, but if you listen to the intro or the outro of the music and then you like the track and then you go listen to it outside of my podcast, because I do always leave links of the artists that I use, and then you hear profanity or curse words, that's on them, that's not me. Obviously I like their music enough to use their music, but so just in case you're wondering, oh, this is not the same music that I heard on the intro or the outro of My Views Extended. I'd also like to take this time to thank Otis McDonald / Joe Bagel and Archduke for allowing me to use their music for the intros and outros of my podcast across the various platforms. The information of the artists that I always use will always be available in the show notes. I have finally finished my first book in several months, and it was okay. But I'm definitely going to look for something in the fiction genre next time, unless there's an amazing entrepreneurial book or, autobiography, memoir of a really interesting businesswoman or something like that. I think I'm going to stick with fiction next time. Like I said, it wasn't a bad book, but it wasn't that great. So if anybody has any suggestions on, what are you reading this week or this past month or whatever, or what books have you read in the past that you think that would be interesting? I think that despite my best efforts, I think I might be getting affected by SAD, seasonal affective disorder, I believe is the term. And I think I might have to invest in a light unit, maybe. But then I also have noticed that in the last week or so that it's, not 2:45 and getting dark out. It's nearly, I think at this point, I think I noticed it's been about 4:55-ish before the sun starts setting. So we are getting more light, which is awesome. But I think because despite my positive thinking and despite, trying to get enough sleep and exercising and getting out and getting fresh air and, just keeping that positive mindset, the lack of sun, even if you take out the sun setting really early and just, the constant rain and cloud cover, it is affecting me. And I am sad. And I shouldn't be, for the most part. So, yeah. I think if I do invest in one of those light unit thingamajiggers. I don't know what the proper terminology is. I will let you know if I do invest in one and if it's making any difference, or if it's even going to make a difference since the sun is starting to set later and later. On to ridiculous news. I've heard of this before, but it's been interesting that it's making news around the world. China busts 35 restaurants using opium poppies as seasoning. And this is from the NewYorkTimes.com. And I'll just read directly the part of the quote part of the article. Cases of cooks sprinkling ground poppy powder, which contains low amounts of opiates like morphine and codeine, in soup and seafood are not new in China, though it is unclear whether they can hook a customer or deliver a noticeable buzz. Wow. Are things that bad? Is the restaurant business, is the competition so high that they have to try and hook people with opium poppies as seasoning? Shady. But I'm sure that's not the only place in the world, and I'm sure it won't be the last. In some not so good news, the WHO, the World Health Organization, warns Zika is spreading across the Americas, spurring a vaccine hunt. And again, I will quote, this one is from Yahoo News, news.yahoo.com. The mosquito-borne Zika virus, which has been linked to brain damage in thousands of babies in Brazil, is likely to spread to all countries in the Americas except for Canada and Chile. Oh, I guess that's good for us Canadians, I think, unless you travel to those other places where the Zika virus can spread. Brazil's health ministry, Zika has been linked to a fetal deformation in which infants are born with smaller than usual brains. Brazil has reported 3,893 suspected cases since last Friday, over 30 times more than in any year since 2010. That is equivalent to 1 to 2% of all newborns. We've got no drugs and we've got no vaccines. It's a case of deja vu because that's exactly what we were saying with Ebola. Trudy Lang, she is a professor of global health at the University of Oxford. Like rubella, Zika also causes mild symptoms which can lead to birth defects. Health experts believe a vaccine is needed to protect girls before they reach childbearing age. Zika has also been isolated in human semen, and one case of possible person-to-person sexual transmission has been described. Evidence that those other transmission routes are a viable option, it's limited, so they are on the hunt, in a seriously time crunch hunt, to get a vaccine to protect future women and their fetuses. And again, that is from news.yahoo.com. Unfortunately, there has been a school shooting in Canada, and that fortunately does not happen very often. It was in a school. A 17-year-old male has been charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, 7 counts of attempted murder, and 1 count of unauthorized possession of a firearm. Police say the teen can't be named under the Youth Criminal Justice Act. The investigation is ongoing. It's kind of sad that you're not surprised, because it's been happening, right across to our neighbors in the U.S. It happens on a pretty, unfortunately, regular basis, whether it's schools or, movie theaters, wherever, malls. It's sad, and I feel horrific for the people who are present, for the families of the victims. What do we do to make sure that this doesn't happen again? We have very strict gun laws in Canada. I don't know all the details, but I do know you can have, I think they're rifles and things like that, because we do have gun ranges, I think they're called. And I know most people who are farmers, hunters, have them, to protect your land if you go hunting, obviously to kill. So we do have them, and there are gun registries, and obviously, everybody has, not everybody, but a lot of people have handguns illegally. I don't know. It's just scary that it's not necessarily surprising because we live so close. Scary that it is coming to Canada, and I just hope that this is not a copycat crime. And I'm sure in the next, I mean, every day we're hearing a little bit more about what happened. I'm sure in the upcoming weeks and months we'll find out about what happened, because the male that was charged, a 17-year-old, he was apprehended. They didn't kill him. So I hope that he talks and lets the RCMP investigators know what was happening, what was going on in his mind, so we can hopefully use this to prevent these things from occurring in the future. And that's the unfortunate thing too, when they do kill people, when they do kill the suspects in these cases, whether it's mass shootings or single shootings, unfortunately when the police shoot them, we're never going to know why. And even if it's not necessarily a vendetta, if it's somebody with a mental health issue, we need to know, was it a mental health issue, so we can fix the system to help these people, to make sure that it doesn't get to that point of taking other people's lives and their own lives. So as much as I'm not happy, that obviously I'm not happy, of course, that he took people's lives, but I'm glad that he was taken alive, and hopefully that he speaks. Hopefully he doesn't freeze up, and he lets them know what was happening, so we can help prevent this in the future. The next story that I read about was, there's a 14-year-old girl testifying against Native American mascots, and she said that the crowd shouted, "Get off the stage," expletive of what people would call a Native American, with starts with an S. I'm not going to say it because I don't use those derogatory terms even for a story. And I will of course use this, or I will link this to in the show notes, the article, and this was from the HuffingtonPost.com. She was standing up to say that this isn't right and why it's not right to use Native Americans as mascots in sports teams. And she just got met with racial insults and slurs. And unfortunately, again, I'm not surprised by this. I'm just not surprised by this. Not to take away from the issue, but for a second, we still hear, and if you're at the sports events and you see it firsthand, but if you hear on the news or in the newspaper that you still hear about bananas being thrown on ice rinks, and on soccer fields, and you hear people from the crowds making monkey sounds as a black hockey player is coming onto the ice, how can we be surprised that it extends to other minorities? I'm not really surprised at all. What do you do? The only thing I can think of right now is to keep talking, keep sharing your stories. Don't stay silent. You have to ignore the sighs that you're going to get, the eye rolls that you're going to get, the here we go again under the breath of the person who doesn't want to hear about race issues. Keep talking. If we don't fight for ourselves, no one else will. And that goes for any group or community that is being put down because of who they are. Just outside of Pittsburgh in the US, a mother was fatally shot after reportedly rebuffing man's advances. Mother of two, Janice Talton Jackson, 29, was fatally shot after she refused to talk to a man at a local bar, officials say. The suspect allegedly followed her to her car before shooting and killing her. The suspect has been charged with homicide. Unfortunately, this is not the first time that I've heard of a woman being killed because she dismissed or refused the advances of a man. The other recent one that I heard of in recent history was in Detroit in 2014. And I'll actually leave the link to both stories in the show notes. She again was approached by a man and was interested, and actually I think at the one that was in Detroit in 2014, I believe she was with her fiance at the time, and she let him know I'm with my fiance, and he still didn't accept that, and he killed her. My question is, why on earth do men think that we owe them anything? We do not have to say hello. We do not have to say hello, let alone anything else. Get over it and get over it yourself. I'm in the ground, or in this case, this mother of two, Janice Talton Jackson, is in the ground because your ego was hurt. I would love to say that this person was mentally ill, but unfortunately this entitled behavior is not only reserved for the mentally ill. I'm not shading the mentally ill. I have not been shot at myself, but men have gotten extremely angry and actually cussed me out because I did not give them the time of day. Cussed me out, called me stuck up, who do I think I am, etc., etc. I just kept my head up, ignored them, and went about my business. Well, most of the time. In the past, well, I'd like to think I'm not as aggressive as I was in my past. Not to say that I would get into physical altercations, but I would certainly let them know and ask them who do they think they are. But I don't do that anymore because it's just not worth it. I just want to share a little story. I was at a SkyTrain station this summer, and there was a girl, young girl, I'd say probably she's either in her late teens, early 20s. And she was, I'm assuming she was either coming or going to a yoga class, because she was, dressed in yoga attire and she had a yoga mat. So obviously she's coming and going to a class, and she had headphones on, but that doesn't mean anything, because, that's a trick that we use. Females use to have headphones in it, and most of the time it doesn't have anything in it. We just use it to so people will leave us alone. Anyway, he went up to her and he tried saying something, hi, and hey, you going to yoga class? Hey, how are you? Hey, you looking cute? All this foolishness, nonsense. Anyway, she chose to ignore the guy, and he was not happy at all. She didn't make her face funny. She didn't, turn her face and cut her eye at him or anything. She just chose to ignore him. It went from trying to talk to her. The guy went from trying to talk to her to walking in front of her. And because he was ignored, calling her, a bitch, and calling her stuck up, continually calling her these things, getting louder, until she, the train came and she went on the train. His friend that was with him just shook his head and laughed. I don't know why he was shaking his head and laughing, if he was embarrassed, if he thought she deserved it, if he was like laughing at him. I don't know who he was laughing at, but he certainly didn't try to alleviate the situation. I don't know if he could have anyways. Maybe this young lady was having a bad day. Maybe she had a boyfriend. Maybe she's into girls. Maybe her parents are super strict and she's not even allowed to be seen talking to guys. Maybe, I know it's hard to believe, but maybe she just didn't find him attractive. Who knows why she chose to ignore him? It really doesn't matter. She owes him nothing. Men, young men, old men, get it through your thick skulls. We owe you nothing. Sure, it's nice to say hi back to someone that says hi to you, but it's not an obligation. But unfortunately, as women, we often can sense a hi just as a hi to another person from a hi, and let the games begin. There's a difference, and if you're out in society, you know the difference. Sometimes we as women, we just want to get from point A to point B in peace. We want to put our heads down or just look out the window, mind our business peacefully. It's as simple as that. Now this poor woman in the news is in the ground. Her children don't have a mother because of an ignorant fool. What do you think about some men, not all men, but some men, and their belief that we have to acknowledge their advances? That brings me to, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because I'm sure ranting is not good for my blood pressure, but it's probably not good to keep it in. That brings me to this week's rant. I had originally wanted to talk about the Oscars, and at that point, what I was actor Michael Caine and his 2 cents, and every other person who just doesn't get it. Yes, everyone has the right to their opinion, but you also have the right to the backlash. The big pushback that I find with the Oscars is that people are saying that there wasn't any Oscar-worthy performances from Black actors or other actors of other non-white actors. I didn't see the movies, and so I have no opinion about those particular movies. But no one said anything about voting for someone because of their race, and that's ridiculous. I think most people who are upset about this are not expecting people to get voted for because of their race to fill a quota. Although I do know a lot of people who do vote or hire someone based on their race versus their actual qualifications. Many Black Americans that I know voted for Obama because he was Black versus actually agreeing with his policies and politics. Haven't the Oscars been around for 88 years, and the few roles that we have won are usually, in my opinion, the worst roles and representations of Black people. In my opinions, they are the prostitutes, the drug dealers, the crooked cops. But yeah, I guess we should just be happy and just shut the hell up, huh? I just don't think that many people get that it's not about these Oscars. It's about the larger picture of race and how we are not accepted or acknowledged in general. And I'm not just talking about Black people, I'm talking about all non-white people. We are, in general, not accepted or acknowledged. I'm tired of this conversation, but it needs to be had. You either get it or you don't. And by the way, and I've heard that, what did Michael Caine, he said something about just be, what did he say, be patient? I believe it was him that said be patient. How much more patient can any group be? Keep waiting and be patient while our young men are gunned down. Keep being patient while racial slurs are being shouted at a young Aboriginal girl standing up for her people. We are sick of being patient because obviously that isn't working. Part of this article is from theindependent.co.uk, and I will leave links in the description below. What I'm grateful for this week. I think that it's going to be pretty simple. I'm grateful that the sun is setting a little later. Now it's not that bad like where in the summertime it was 10 o'clock and it was still bright as if it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But I think we're about, like I think I said earlier, it's about 4:45 when the sun's setting. So it's so nice to be able to not have to rush home because, you know, when you're taking public transportation or you're by yourself, most of the time I am coming back in the dark, but I prefer not to come back in the dark. Just, you know, it's not that I live in an unsafe neighborhood, but I don't know the neighborhood and I just prefer to be back. And it kind of sucks that, you know, you have to run home by 3 o'clock and finish your errands by 3 o'clock. And it probably wouldn't be a big deal if I had a car, but so yeah, I'm just grateful that the sun is setting later so I don't have to run home as quickly and I can just enjoy the sunshine. Because here too, I've noticed on the West Coast that the brightness of the sun and it doesn't really warm up until around 3 o'clock anyways. So it was literally warming up at like it'd be the warmest part of the day as the sun was setting, which was so weird. And I think I noticed that actually in the summertime, it was because back east, the hottest, like by the time I got to like 11:30, 12 o'clock, no, actually no, let me stretch out. But at the time I got to 12:30, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, that was the hottest time of the day. So if you kind of went out before that time or went out around after 3, you were okay. During the summertime, you weren't going to roast to death. But here I noticed in the summertime, especially because we had this really odd heat wave that we're not even supposed to get in this part of the country. But it was like, so I sit there and do my errands and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go out at 3 o'clock. It should start to cool down. And I'd be out and I'm like, why is it getting hotter and hotter and hotter as I'm going about my errands? And I was like, so I asked a friend who lives here, and it was like, oh, that's how it is here. The temperature peaks at around that 3 o'clock time. That's just weird. It's just going to take me time to get used to all of these different weather changes. So yeah, that's what I'm grateful for this past week. More sun. Yay. So hopefully I won't feel as sad as I've been feeling, and maybe I won't need that light after all. What are you grateful for this past week? Thank you for tuning in to episode 9 of My Views Extended. I would love to hear feedback, comments on what you think of this podcast and the topics that I've discussed this week. You can listen to My Views Extended at nattyjanelle.com, YouTube, and Stitcher, I think, where you can subscribe, like, and leave a comment. I will leave links in the show notes. As more listening platforms are added or changed, I will let you know. Till next time, this is Nadia.
You are Aphrodite, you are Nefertiti, you are the creator of all the life that I'm seeing. You are Aphrodite, you are Nefertiti, you are the creator of all the life that I'm seeing. You are Aphrodite, you are Nefertiti, you are the creator of all the life that I'm seeing. You are Aphrodite, you are Nefertiti, you are the creator of all the life that I'm seeing. You are Aphrodite, you are Nefertiti, you are the creator of all the life that I'm seeing. You are Aphrodite, you are Nefertiti, you are the creator of all the life that I'm seeing. You are Aphrodite, you are Nefertiti, you are the creator of all the life that I'm seeing. You are Aphrodite, you are Nefertiti, you are the creator of all the life that I'm seeing. You are mind of a queen, girl, soul of a goddess. Want you pop it cause you free, girl, but not for me. You just like dancing for yourself, don't you? You got a pocket and a spirit full of wealth, don't you? Even if you don't, you bout to have it in a minute, right? You ain't no doubt that you like twerking in the mirror, right? But that's so good, cause baby, you deserve respect regardless. Whether you Mother Teresa or you Sister Harley, you still a star. So don't smile cause you living. You got value and vision. And when you with your friends, y'all like to dance like some strippers. Oh, you so ratchet queen. But it don't matter, you still got it, you still magic queen. Hey, don't you know you are the glory of this earth, girl? You give birth, girl, I promise you got so much worth, girl. You better work, girl. See, I see you as my equal, and we are equal, so let's go flex for the people. Like, you are Aphrodite, you are Nefertiti, you are the creator of all the life that I'm seeing. You are Aphrodite, you are Nefertiti, you are the creator of all the life that I'm seeing. You are Aphrodite, you are Nefertiti, you are the creator of all the life that I'm seeing. You are Aphrodite, you are Nefertiti, you are the creator of all the life that I'm seeing. You
Some say Jesus was married and that the wife was married, but I can bet a bag of cream if you would have been a Nazarene. By the time he met Miss Magdalene, you would have been Miss Jesus in theory. Yeah, I know I be facetious, but like, who could pass you up? You extra worthy, girl. You bad on Instagram and bad in person. Heart of gold is so good like the globe, girl, that's for certain. You open-minded, never blind, cause hey girl, that's for curtains. Windows, no comprendo, you don't know Nintendo. You don't play no games, you don't fear no evil. You don't stun no lames, you think all are equal. Girl, don't ever change, man, none of abundances or bundles I will buy you. Whether you natural with mayonnaise caps or hella naps, I'm still gon' like you. Girl, I love to see you do just what you love to. Be just who you are. Whether you be shooting moon or shining star, I be like, don't fret, the best is yet to come. Play your guitar. If you don't know what's next, we'll tell you who you are.
1, 2, 3, you are Aphrodite, you are Nefertiti, you are the creator of all the life that I'm seeing. You are Aphrodite, you are Nefertiti, you are the creator of all the life that I'm seeing. You are Aphrodite, you are Nefertiti, you are the creator of all the life that I'm seeing. You are Aphrodite, you are Nefertiti, you are the creator of all the life that I'm seeing. You are
A seed of you, a touch of me. Together we created fifth dimensional beings. A seed of you, a touch of me. Together we created fifth dimensional beings. A seed of you, a touch of me. Together we created fifth dimensional beings. A seed of you, a touch of me. Together we created fifth dimensional beings.